It's day 4 of the Skilling Chess Open, which means that it's time for the quarterfinals. They play a best of 2 in 15-minute and 10-second increment rapid. We have Magnus Carlsen versus Anish Giri. That's why they're on the thumbnail. Magnus tweeted at Anish earlier in the day saying he's playing that guy today. We have Hikaru versus MVL, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave of France, WESLEY So, TEIMOUR Rajabov, and Jan Nepomniachtchi versus Levon ARONIAN. Before we get into the games, I just want to say thank you to all of you because I've seen so many of your comments saying you're waiting for the recap till late in the night. I appreciate it very much. Let's jump into the games, and at the end, I have a really funny clip of Hikaru for you. Okay, so we began the day, Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces going into this Rogozin defense. I made a video of Anish Giri crushing Magnus Carlsen in the Magnus Carlsen Tour back in April in this very defense. Not just in this very defense, but in this very line. The same colors. Anish goes for the c3 knight because of this pin, and we get knight c6 and g5 and h5. Just flying down the board at Magnus Carlsen looking to trade his bishop, trap his bishop. So Magnus plays h4 and damages his own structure, and here Anish was thinking for a long time and played gh4. And Magnus, like a really sensible person, completely disregards the fact that he can take this pawn with 3 different pieces and instead plays the move bishop b5. And this is very poisonous because if Anish takes on g3, Magnus then has castles, different knight e5 ideas going after the knight here, and the computer was showing that taking here is extremely dangerous if you play it like a combination of ideas. Knight e5, in this particular case, in another position, it's castles. So Anish spent a lot of time after bishop b5 and played queen d6, trying to go here and hitting the king, that's not the king, hitting the king and the pawn, and giving some serious problems to Magnus. This is where Magnus should have castled. And maybe he forgot this in his preparation, I don't exactly know what was going on, but he didn't castle, and instead he took back on h4 and played queen g3, king f1. Anish then played rook g8, threatening mates. We get rook g1, take, and bishop d7. Very practical decision by Anish, defending his knight and going for long castle. Here, Magnus started doing some extremely strange stuff. He played the move rook c5, attacking the pawn on d5, which is not so strange. But then, Anish just went back and Magnus traded. After spending some time moving around, he allows his king to be checked, and then he starts running his king. Literally in the middle of the game, just running his king. At this point, the position is completely lost for Magnus, and Anish plays rook e8 and f6. He's got all his pieces ready to go. You have knight back to f3, and here Anish plays queen g3, and Magnus gives a check, keeps running. Queen f4 going for a trade of queens, queen f2, and Anish, in this position, had the glorious move bishop to e2. And bishop e2 allows you to take the pawn with a check, and just move your king. Just move your king like to a7, for example. And Anish is just winning because of all the pressure that he has on Magnus's position. Magnus's position completely falls apart here. After bishop b2, if you play something like rook c2, pinning the bishop to the queen, Anish here has rook takes pawn. And if you take back, you don't take the rook. You give a check. Then 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 you give a check, then you mate. But that didn't happen. Anish didn't play bishop e2. Anish could have pulled off another immortal game, but instead of playing the move bishop to e2, he took the pawn, and the queens got traded, and Magnus very quickly traded the rest of the pieces, won the pawn, and despite having a broken structure, they played on for a little bit. Magnus managed to consolidate, the pieces got traded, and despite being a pawn down, he creates an unbreakable blockade on the dark squares and draws the game against Mr. Giri. Heartbreak. Absolute heartbreak here. I was watching this game like, oh my gosh, Anish is going to do it again. But he drew. Another really exciting game from the first round, there were 3 of them, was the game between WESLEY So and TEIMOUR Rajabov. It was an Italian opening, a gioco piano. Very solid system. Both players kind of looking symmetrical. Nothing too complicated yet. I mean, their players are kind of getting into their flow here. Knight f1, queen c2, WESLEY trying to advance on the queen side, d4 from Rajabov breaking in the center, knight g6, knight g3, take, the bishop moves over to b6. And here, WESLEY, it looked like he was getting into like a good rhythm. I mean, he played knight f5, attacking the queen, nice position for the knight. But then he kind of hesitated, and then he finally decided to take on h6. He sacrifices the bishop and plays queen d2, a full piece sacrifice. Looks like he's about to go deliver a mate. But f6. And despite Wesley playing d5, locking the queen out of the castle, he's activated Rajabov's bishop. And Rajabov plays knight back to f8. And his king, in this position, looks to be under just a very easy, like, repetition of moves. I mean, he could go, you know, to sacrifice material, but Rajabov here said, no, I'm okay repeating. I'm okay repeating. And Wesley said, I'm not okay repeating, and played knight back to h2, trying to go knight g4, and get over here. And Rajabov said, excuse me? Knight f4. Your queen's blocked. How are you going to beat me without the queen in the attack? Knight h7, everything's protected. Knight g5. Now who's attacking who? We have a convention of horsies. Little convention of horsies here on the king side. King f7. Take my knight. Check. Now I have a new knight. You took one, I got 2 pawns. You got 2 horsies that are about to take on 2 rooks. Knight h6, king e7. Rook g1, king is running. Rook a1. Rook is trying to come around here if the king ever makes it. Queen e4. The point is that if you play rook g7, I'm just going to block. So instead of that, we got knight f5, which covers this square. But now, the beautiful move, rook g8, a move by Rajabov which literally looks illegal. Not illegal, it just looks like it hangs a rook. So he takes it, but then the knight falls. And this, check, king e8, the king is completely safe. Queen d1, check, here, and the killer move. Who would have expected it? King to f8. It is the king that is the undoing of Wesley's position. Wesley plays rook g4 and king f7 and resigns the game because his knight is trapped, and once his knight is going to fall, everything else in his position will fall. A stunning result as Rajabov defeats Wesley So in the first round. The last game of the first round that I have for you is the game between MVL and Hikaru. This one was 20 moves of Berlin defense theory. This is the Berlin. This is the kind of main line queen trade of the Berlin. This is h3 Berlin. There's a lot of theory here, a lot of theory here, a lot of theory here, all of this theory. And this is the most kind of interesting moment of the game. Right here, actually, move 26 even, move 26, the players actually started thinking. And Hikaru thought for a long time here, and he played a move which he said afterward was actually not in his preparation. He actually mixed up the right move in his preparation. He played the very natural looking bishop to e6, rook f2, but his problem here is that his rook is a little bit stuck. The bishop protects the knight, so you're going to play h5 at some point. That's exactly what MVL did, and then took on f7. In doing so, MVL has now given himself 3 on 1, so the endgame here is nice for him, and e6, bishop h5, g4. That's the point. Now, if you take, like he did, if you don't take, then rook f6 and your bishop's going to run out of moves, e7 comes and rook f8 is coming. So Hikaru has to scramble and give up the rook. But, this is the most fascinating thing about this position. How is white ever going to win this? The pawns are on the exact same side, so your pawns will never break through. And what if black just finds a way to coordinate the knight and the bishop in a way that the 2 rooks can't attack them? Like in a perfect world, if you put like pawn, 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 king, bishop. How will white ever break through? Well, let's find out. Will MVL break through? Rook f7, h5. Knight c5, rook e5, b6. King comes closer, a5. Hikaru is looking for a position where he's going to bring his king, maybe bring the knight around. And this was kind of the first slight error that Hikaru made in the game. He allowed this. This is genius from MVL. I mean, if you're a super GM watching this, hi, first of all, you won't say this is so genius, you'll say this is obvious. You're going to sacrifice your piece to triple your opponent's pawns. And that's what MVL does. And he's able to scoop up 2 pawns in the process and have an outside pass pawn. It would have been better for Hikaru to probably not allow this and play knight b7, knight d6 before committing his king. Something like that, something along those lines. But the way it happens in the game is MVL now can put endless pressure, and it's so difficult to figure out how to coordinate your pawns here. So difficult. Hikaru does his best, but it looks like MVL does a whole lot of, like, nothing, just shuffling. But the black position unwinds because as long as you pick up one of these pawns and kill the coordination of the bishop for the defending the other pawns, you're going to win. And actually, after rook g1, Hikaru just resigned, because bishop is hit, rook h1, you win this pawn. Once you win this pawn, you start going for those two pawns. Don't put your rook on h5 when the bishop is covering it, but a very instructive endgame by MVL, sacking the exchange for the damaging of the structure. In the first round, there were a few other results, not a few other results, there was just one result. NEPO and ARONIAN drew their game. So we go to round 2. I'm going to show you the game first between NEPO and ARONIAN. This was an Italian, very peaceful Italian. D5, an early D5, not one that we saw in the Rajabov game. Take, and rook e1. And then we get bishop g4, and relatively peaceful. Again, a lot of shuffling in these Italians. First trade comes on move 15, with the bishop being traded for the knight. I don't love this for black. I mean, just giving me all this activity, but it's theory. f5 is kind of the point. You can't take this pawn because you pin yourself, and then g6 is going to happen. d4, f4. ARONIAN fighting. Knight e4, he takes in the center. Rather than taking back, first NEPO takes on c6 and takes back on f4, and plays knight e5. Right here, ARONIAN jumped into the position with the knight. He hit f2, e1, f4, and he got pinned. Like this. Not like some of the YouTube comments. He got pinned to the queen, but what he should have played was rook f4. And after rook d3, just queen attack, rook attack, queen f8. You're out of danger, and this bishop is very strong. For a completely inexplicable reason, he took the rook on e1, sacrificing his queen, and now bishop e5 is creating a checkmate, so you have to go rook d7, and then king h2 sidesteps the pin. The knight is stuck and the bishop is bad. Now watch how NEPO converts this position. Knight d3, bishop g7, sacrificing for a moment to get the knight. c5 by ARONIAN, and now a very, very instructive move, c4. The door is shut on the bishop. So we get c6. Now you look around the board and you go, where is my advantage? Right here. These three pawns will decide the game. Watch as NEPO slowly crawls forward on the king side. All of the next, 15 moves he plays are on the king side. Every single move. King h3, f5 literally can be narrowed down to a rectangle. Perfect example by NEPO of how to focus where you are stronger. Slowly pushing all of his pawns, pieces coordinating here, queen defending the knight, breaks through, and then finally what black ends up having to do is sacrificing a rook. He gets the knight, but the problem is that NEPO's just promoting the pawn. And he promotes the pawn, and a few moves later, ARONIAN has to resign. King and queen versus king and rook is winning for the queen, but especially when you have an extra pawn. And here, the resignation happens because the king and the rook are too far apart, and there is going to be a sequence of checks to pick up this pawn, ultimately the rook, and this pawn will promote. So NEPO strikes first. He now is up 1.5 to half over ARONIAN. The second game that I have for you in this round is the game between Hikaru and MVL. In the second round, WESLEY, So, and Rajabov drew their game, so Rajabov had a 1-game lead going into game 3, and Giri and Magnus continued to draw, so they were 1-1. MVL plays a Grunfeld, his standard defense, but here he plays dc4, which is seen in less than 1% of games in this position. Looks like a very natural move, but it's not natural to play like this in the Grunfeld. And Hikaru punishes him quickly. c5, castles, take, knight b5. Here there was a ridiculous engine line, de3, knight g5, takes, and rook f2. You sacrifice 3 pawns, but your knights, your bishop, your nut, everything is too active. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and MVL started with knight h5, but this still leads to a position where black has no play, and MVL plays bishop h6, and after rook e1, take, knight d6, the queen is trapped. Takes, knight b6, and now take. The knight he's gotten rid of the knight, you've got pressure on f7, knight g5 is coming, that's exactly what he plays. Now here Hikaru could have just straight up taken, because after rook f7 he's not going to take again, he's going to play queen c4, pinning the rook to the king, but Hikaru chose h3, choosing not to trade, only one piece, and then the queen comes, and you start pushing. d5 is a great move here by MVL, bishop d3, and knight back to f6. So again, Hikaru should have went in. He should have played queen h6, looking for g5, h4, h5, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't. Hikaru was hesitant, played queen f4, and rather than repeating, just played a3 so the pawn couldn't be taken. This was all MVL needed to coordinate his pieces. When you are fighting a queen and you have two rooks or rook bishop or whatever, you gotta coordinate your pieces and create a defensive fortress against the queen. And that's exactly what MVL does. Knight e4 is a perfect move. You cannot make this trade because you kill your winning chances. Two rooks versus a queen like this are going to be very nice. So Hikaru doesn't take the knight and instead tries to advance with the pawns. The problem is, despite moving his king around, MVL's completely solid. He runs his king to safety on c8 and now can basically play rook c7, rook f7 for the rest of the game. Everything is defended. Fantastic defensive effort here. And even here, where MVL gets the rooks off the board for the queen, there are some tricks in this endgame, but he finds all the right ideas. Knight b5, Hikaru pushes. King comes closer to stop the pawn. Hikaru pushes, knight takes pawn. Pushes again, looking for this. A super timely check here, king f4 and knight h4. Hits the bishop, so the bishop has to move, and just in time, he stops the pawn. And he finds one more very nice defensive resource. Rather than losing all his pawns, he finds knight e1. It attacks the bishop, and now the pawn has a red carpet to the end. So the players simplify here, and everything gets traded, and a draw agreed. Hikaru missing his chance very closely in the second game to level the score. MVL continues to maintain a 1-point lead. We move now to the third round. We'll begin with Wesley So, TEIMOUR Radjabov, same colors, but a different opening. This time we have a 4-knight English. We have e3. This is a main line. Bishop before queen c2. Castles, knight d5, rook e8, and queen f5. This looks completely stupid if you've never seen it before, but it's actually the main line. If you put this position in the database, it's probably been seen like tens of thousands of times. The trade happens, and this is White's whole point. You break the structure. a3, bishop c5, and we kind of see the point. White is just expanding a lot on this side of the board. a6, long castle. Why would he castle long when he's pushed all his pawns? Well, black can't really do anything. Black's pieces are restricted by white's pawns. This is a completely okay position for white. Bishop f5, rook g1. Super strange move, but he wants to push. Knight e7, now he pushes in the center. All this space. Whatever will Radjabov do? Watch. Bishop first comes here and then retreats so that the knight has been returned to a passive position. Then he plays a5. So first he strikes on the queen side, forcing b5 and gets a trade of pawns to chip away at Wesley's position, resulting in a pass pawn for TEIMOUR. That's all TEIMOUR needs. He now he allows bishop a3, but rather than defending his pawn, chops at Wesley's center and plays one of the most stunning moves I've ever seen in my life. The move knight d5. Literally looking like a beginner, just putting his knight on a square that can be taken in one move, but realizing that in this position, if Wesley takes, you have check, king b2, and the slow killer, rook c2. I mean, I don't know about slow killer. It's actually, the most impressive move here is not rook c2, it's bishop a5. This is the slow killer, just making a move, outflanking, and bishop c3 is just unstoppable. If you play rook d3, you lose the rook. A beautiful idea. Knight d5 is just, it's just absurd. And Wesley ran his clock really low and played king b2. Now this outflanking, still the knight is hanging. You can go for the same idea. Wesley should have gone for it, but he didn't. Now we have the move knight c3, rook c1, knight e4, and a3. Uh-oh, that pawn is poisoned. You can't take it. But then here Radjabov made a mistake. He played knight c3, allowing the king to take. And there's no move that black can play. The bishop was supposed to go here, but now it can't. So Radjabov plays bishop b4 check. Stunning move. King b4, there is this. And if you avoid king with king b3, you play this anyway. And you glue the king shut with rook a3 coming. Disgusting. Absolutely gross. So you get king takes knight a2. And Wesley, of course, was like, oh, I can just run. Let me run, let me run, let me run. He's going to take my rook, but my king's active. I'm going to push my pawns. King c5. Yes, run, run. But TEIMOUR Radjabov played the second most beautiful move of this game. He didn't take the free rook. He played rook e6. Where is your king going, Wesley? b6, king d5, bishop e4 is mate. Not to mention knight b4 is mate, not to mention rook d8 is mate. If you play d5, what happens is I play check, you go king d4, I check you again, then I take your rook. So Wesley got down to 2 seconds and played b6. And rook a5 is mate in 1. And Teimour Radjabov wins 2 games with black and eliminates Wesley So. Not eliminates, I apologize, that's not what I meant to say. Takes a 1-0 lead over Wesley So. Tomorrow they all play their second game. He has a 1-0 lead. I don't know why I was just so excited. He does not eliminate him. Just add this to the blooper list. But he has a chance to eliminate him tomorrow. Another game in the in this round was the game between Jan Nepomniachtchi versus Levon Aronian. We're beginning round 4 now. In the third round, Hikaru drew again, so he is now going with a 1-point disadvantage into the final round against MVL. And we also have Aronian beating Nepo in the third round, so it's equal. They're equal, and of course Anish and Magnus are equal. They've made 3 draws. So Wesley has lost his match. In the final round, we have Hikaru playing against MVL, and we have Nepo versus Aronian, and we have Magnus versus Giri. So first we're going to look at Nepo versus Aronian. E4, and again, the Italian. What do you expect when you get super GMs? You guys have all seen this before. Last time Aronian played d5, this time he goes for d6. Rook e8, an expansion on the queen side again. Queen c2 and d5. Nice idea here, breaking in the center early. Bishop b2. And Aronian says, I've had just about enough of you, Jan. Knight h5. You've moved your bishop away. Let me play rook here, here, queen d7, and checkmate you. b5, knight e7. c4, chop chop. c6. Saving the bishop and bringing it back to safety, also attacking on the king side. And here Nepo takes the pawn. This looks like a free pawn. I mean, it kind of looks like a free pawn, right? Knight to g6. So, knight g6 invites a lot of trades and a lot of tension in the center of the board. We get d4, and now we get knight f4. I said this was always the plan. This is kind of a separate convention of horses. Now we get knight back to f3, and the second knight comes to h4. Uh-oh, this doesn't look very good. Take, knight g3. Rook e8. It's the only piece that Levon hasn't activated, and now he's activated it. A trade on c6 and bishop c3. And here, Levon really does something nice. h5. Gangster chess. Rook b1 attacking the bishop, bishop c7. That c6 move a long time ago, suddenly the bishop's gonna come alive. Rook b7. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't need to move pieces out of danger if you can create even stronger danger for your opponents. Knight takes h3 check. Pawn takes, bishop takes, and, well, Nepo should have just taken and just been down some material with some big attack coming, maybe some ways to potentially save the game like rook f7. Instead, Nepo plays d5 rather than taking the bishop, and after queen h3, taken rook e2, he resigns. How quickly the flame burns out. Up a game, Nepo loses 2 straight to Aronian in a crazy fashion, and it's Aronian taking a 1-0 lead into tomorrow to potentially eliminate Nepo. We will finish the day with Giri Carlsen. Who won the match? There was a winner. e4, e5. And another Italian, easy peasy. I mean, how many Italians have we seen today? We can just basically breeze through this. But an interesting Italian. One where Magnus just allows a pawn sacrifice for activity. He gives Anish the pawn and plays knight g6 and even damages his own structure. So he has a damaged pawn structure and he's down a pawn. But he's counterbalancing that with a killer bishop, an active rook, and this very strange bishop on b5 which can get attacked. And that was more than enough. Bishop e3, and that forced Giri to take with the pawn, because if he took with a rook, rook d2 is coming, for example, very unpleasant. And he's just decided that he wants to take with the pawn. But now we get king f7, a move which just stunning, because like, why would you put your king in front of all the pieces? And king e7. So now the king is coming. Magnus adhering to endgame principles of bringing the king. And then bishop c4 attacks the rook. And then the rook comes into d3. And then the king comes closer. And then the bishop avoids a trade. And then the king comes closer. And then the rook reinforces the other rook. And then there's a trade. He brings the bishop because he wants to take on e4. Anish brings the king closer. Magnus brings the rook up to go rook b6, a4. And also rook f6 to hit the king. Bishop d1 by Anish. We get bishop back to c4. b3, inducing another second rank weakness. Rook d2 check. I mean, Magnus just plays on another planet. Every move he makes flows like wind. It's unbelievable. Bishop goes back to e6 to avoid getting captured. That one's simple. Now he wins back his pawn. Now he wins back the second pawn because Anish wanted to create a trade there to go rook f7. And that's it. Anish invades with the rook, loses the rest of his pawns, and I can't even tell you, like, how shocked I was when I toggled to this game and I saw that Magnus just converted this. Pushed the pawn, restricted Anish's rook to staying on a1, and that's it. The game is all but lost. You play a few moves, you stop Anish's pawns from coming forward, his rook cannot move, king is coming, rook is coming, game is over. Like that. Just cut right through him. 3 draws and a win for Magnus, and he takes a 1-0 lead. No tweeting today. No tweeting today for Anish. He did tweet. He said, you know, we'll get him tomorrow, something along those lines. And the last thing in the final round that happened is Hikaru played a wild game. Absolutely wild game against MVL, but unfortunately came up short at the end. It was, he sacrificed a few pawns, and Hikaru unfortunately drew again, and since MVL won the first game, it was 2.5, 1.5. MVL was the winner. But we interviewed Hikaru after, and as promised, you should stick around for the clip. I will end this video with that clip. It's hilarious, and I'm not going to spoil it, so enjoy. Hopefully you're enjoying the recaps. Once again, if you made it this far, leave a comment. I've been reading the comments. I'm loving the positivity. The last video had like 150,000 views, completely insane, so thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the next recap. But tomorrow, if you're going to try to pull a NEPO, don't pull that now. There's a lot of NEPOs. There's a lot of different versions of...
What do you mean tomorrow?
Well, like tomorrow you have to play again. So what right? So I'm saying...
Wait, what?
What?
You do know the format, right? You...
Whoa, wait, what? Wait a second, wait. It's not best of one?
No? Did you think you're out?
Yeah, you have another match tomorrow.
This was
you
your
have to play on Thanksgiving.
Match. You're playing again,
yeah, tomorrow,
and you're gonna make a comeback.
Wait, so it's best of 3?
It's best of 2. So if tomorrow you win the Rapid, you have to play Blitz and Armageddon on the same day.
Oh, well then, yeah, then that changes my mood completely. Yeah, then I don't care at all. Okay, that's good to know.